AIDS? Like what kind of AIDS?
It's an STD. It's
AIDS? Well, it's a disease, of course.
Immunal something deficiency.
AIDS is a virus.
It's a disease that killed Eazy-E.
It is passed through bodily fluids.
it's from exchanging bodily fluids.
It is after HIV if you have unprotected sex or something.
And it weakens your defenses and all that.
Something that you don't want.
Do you mean like a personal trainer?
It's an STD.
I've had HIV for about 5 years now. Completely healthy. My viral load is undetectable. I actually found out because I tried to join the Army. The Army has a policy that they do not permit new candidates to join the military, any branch of the military, if they have HIV. If you're already in the military and you contracted overseas or like that, then you're permitted to stay within the military. But you can only serve locally, so they don't send you out to war or anything like that. So what happened was I did the blood tests. I passed everything. I went through my physical, did the mental testing, did everything. I was going to be a medic. And about 3 to 4 weeks ago, I got a letter in the mail. The letter is kind of vague. It just says that we need to talk to you. Something came up in your something or other. It's very vague. It doesn't tell you anything. So I had to go back to my recruiter. My recruiter drove me right back up to they have an actual office, like a hub. And all I can really remember is that I met with this very old African-American man who had white hair and blue eyes. And that's kind of dumb, but that's what I remember. And he just sat me down. I had to wait about 6 hours, and I did nothing. I just sat for 6 hours. And then they sat me down with this man, and he told me, he's like, your blood work came back, and your blood work came back positive, HIV positive. And at that time, I had my suspicions, because I'd been sick a few times, and I had my suspicions. And so I had written out these little questions. I brought a little book with me, because I figured, I'm going to be a mess, so I might as well have some questions that I can answer. So, of course, me being the baby I am, I started to bawl, very manly, I know. But yeah, I started to cry, and I started asking him, because I just started asking him a question. So I was like, does this mean I can't join any part of the military? And he's like, yes. And I was like, am I going to die? And he said, I don't know.
Most people are still with the idea that you can get HIV through blood transfusions and through being blood brothers and blood sisters, which, yeah, it's possible, right? But that's not how most people are getting HIV. So in a way, I think there's a lot of old ideas that are not preparing people today for the new challenges and the new ways in which people are getting HIV. I also think that there's a lot of thinking that it's some types of people who get HIV, and that wouldn't happen to me, because I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing that, or I'm not getting a blood transfusion anytime soon.
Many of my clients had been living with the virus for a while, and so it was something that was part of their life and something that they had learned to manage. So they accessed services here, including our food bank. They were going to see their doctor on a regular basis, and they were taking their medications as prescribed. I have told people who have newly tested HIV positive that the result came back positive. And usually it's, and understandably, it's a very difficult place for them to start from. But I've almost always seen people really kind of come to terms with living with HIV and be able to manage the infection.
HIV is the name of the virus, that's like the virus. And then AIDS is what happens if you don't use medication or treatment. So it becomes AIDS. I think in the beginning of the epidemic, most people were going from having HIV to AIDS very quickly, or they would realize that they had the virus once they had AIDS. So I think that's why the word AIDS is more familiar, and people relate to people with AIDS or you're going to get the AIDS, as opposed to HIV, which is you can live up to 10 years with HIV and not have AIDS, but our people are more familiar with the word AIDS than with HIV.
If we have abstinence-based sex education, so we're really talking about people not having sex, but people are having sex, then what kind of good material or skills are we giving them when they're finding themselves in situations where they're going to have sex and it's going to be unprotected? The number in Utah sits around about 3,200 people. So it's about 0.7% of the population is living with HIV or has an AIDS diagnosis.
I have not taught health in public school. However, I did teach alternative school, and I got to see the health sections. And it very much glosses over all sexuality, all sexual practice, all sexual interaction, which I think is kind of unsafe because, you know, we're naturally curious people, in particular about sex. And if you don't have knowledge, then you seek knowledge. And if you're seeking knowledge from friends and the internet, there's a lot of bad information out there. So we try to give them quality information so the kids know legitimately what's out there and what's dangerous and what they can run into, as well as, you know, what safe sexual practices are.
It's pretty common where people understand AIDS but not HIV. So HIV is the thing that people come in to be tested for. They want to know if they have this virus, which is eventually going to cause a disease. And I think most people, they just have kind of what they've heard, maybe what they read about in a history book, and if they're fortunate, or maybe not so fortunate, it's what they heard in their health classes. So it's very general. People can't say a lot about it. And what's really kind of challenging is that sometimes people really struggle to come up with creative and sound ways to prevent the spread of HIV and really other sexually transmitted infections. And I see that's where there's really a deficit in knowledge, where people know that HIV is this virus that they don't want to get, but when it comes to not getting it, it's a lot more difficult for people to generate good ideas about how they can stay safe and healthy, and how they can protect their partners as well.
I honestly thought that it wouldn't happen to me, or I had some weird, you know what I mean? Because how do I explain this? I assumed that when you got it, there was like some horrible, because when you read about it, there's like, you know, some horrible, you know, I assumed that I would have got it already, or if it didn't happen to me or something like that. So I thought either I was young and it wasn't going to happen to me, or I was somehow immune to it. That's how I thought.
So what really concerns me is that the education that people get is really fear-based. And fear is sometimes a very poor motivation in terms of getting people to change behaviors or just practice behaviors that are ultimately going to keep them safe and healthy. So I think it is unfortunate if the only thing that people are hearing about in school is HIV can kill you, or if you get a sexually transmitted infection, it's going to ruin your life. Sometimes that just motivates people to not come in and get tested because they wouldn't want to know that they had gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, HPV.
A lot of people thinking that they don't know anyone with HIV, you know, so it's weird during our little gatherings with the Latino group. So they talk as if no one in the group was HIV positive. You know, once you say this is a scary thing, people don't want to find out that they have HIV or AIDS. So that's a challenge to get people tested and treated. But it also affects how we see people living with HIV or AIDS, right? We see them as the scary things that we shouldn't touch, or friends that maybe we shouldn't have. That promotes stigma and discrimination, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have, to actually know what living with HIV is and how it is the virus that we know what, but we're okay with the people.
You can live a full and healthy life with HIV, with HIV or AIDS. There's still so much. I just see a lot of people give up. there's so many things that people can do, that you can live a full and healthy life. You don't, just because you have this doesn't mean some people will shun you, some people will hate you, but fuck them. You know what I mean? The world is full of many people, and if you just continue and push and find those people, you can live a full and healthy life. Sexual education is key. If you don't know about it, people make stupid choices, like I did, and you know what I mean? Then you could just be another number, and I don't want to ever see anybody else contract HIV.
The words that came stumbling from behind your lips, the four perfect letters that I wrote on your lips, the lies and deception that I call the truth. The truth.